Hey everybody, and welcome to our video critique for the Week 5 Assignment 3, which is your HDR assignment. So hello, welcome, it's me, Colin, your instructor once again, and yeah, this time around we're going to be looking at Teresa's work, at excuse me, at Tammy's work, at Montague's work, and at Morel's work. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in with Miss Teresa's work. I had to laugh. She says right in the written portion that she went overboard with this. Excuse me. So, what you have here, sorry, I am going to go a little bit into, I guess, what these should look like. You know, I'm going to look a little bit at your images that you combine together, because if they don't look right, you're not going to get a real true HDR image. So they should look something like this. You want one that's about 2 stops underexposed, one shot that's about 1 stop underexposed, and one shot that's more or less dead on, although this is actually, looking at your numbers here, this is actually the same image twice, even though it looks slightly lighter here than it does there. Anyway, one that's pretty much right on, one that's like a stop overexposed, and then one that's 2 stops overexposed. Now that's, I would say, maybe, looking at the difference there, f 5.6, 15th of a second, it's the same one. Looks like, well, according to the numbers you put down here, it's the same one, but it doesn't look exactly. Anyway, that's kind of the spread you want to have. Yeah. Oh, there's that one 5.6, and 6.6. I don't know. No? Okay. Anyway, you do want to have 5 to 6, a minimum of 5 to 6 images. So that you can really get, because basically what it's doing is it's taking, on this one, you know, it's grabbing some details from the highlights, it's grabbing some details from the shadows, and like the, you know, the highlights and shadows here are blown out here. So it's sort of taking the low range here, and some of, you know, it's taking all those averages, or all those exposures from these images, and sort of combining them together to get something that's longer, it's a longer dynamic range than you could achieve in any one image. So if you don't have, you know, 2 stops under, 1 stop under, you know, 1 stop over, 2 stop over, you're not going to really get the true HDR image. And I would say that you definitely got it. I mean, this looks like an HDR image, for sure. I also just think it's a pretty nice looking image. But I also like this aesthetic of sort of things that are super textury, things that are, you know, sort of run down or old looking. Excuse me. Sorry. I'm just always really been into that aesthetic, so I'm already predisposed to liking this image, but it's also really well made. The colors are used really well. And it is, I think this is good, like all this texture really does kind of, the HDR does add something to that, but it sort of heightens it. You do get sort of a glowing thing, that I think is really effective there. And then you have a couple other versions. Definitely like both of these, although I gotta say, that black and white is killer. I really like that. So we have another image here. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't stop yawning. And again, we have the, you know, the good spread here. 2 stops under, 1 stop under, pretty much right on. And it looks like the same thing here as before. This is really only 1, 2, 3, 4 shots, it looks like. But yeah. Anyway, it's more or less what you want to see. Even if it's not necessarily 100% correct. And then, yeah, exactly. Another pretty nice shot. My only complaint would be maybe just to crop off this top part here. So you just have this bottom I feel like these are maybe slightly distracting at the top. So you just cut off right under that window, and this is sort of your whole shot. I really, again, like the colors here. I like the texture. Really pretty nice. Again, killer right here. Both the monochrome, the black and white, and the split tone. I'm going to try and just kind of briefly go through these. I do want to, just sort of show them all to you guys, because you definitely did a lot of work on them. And there are some really great things. This looks like some sort of abandoned stadium or something. What are all these things? I don't remember reading that in your thing. Excuse me, but it has also been a long day. I might have read it and forgotten it. So I would say one of those first two images that I really kind of spent some time talking about would be your most successful one here, although, again, there's a ton of nice stuff here. So Teresa, excellent work. Thank you very much. Alright, next up is Tammy. And, okay. Again, good. Let's see, you have going from... Alright, so she did. This is, again, she has the right idea here, right? So you keep your aperture the same, which throughout all these is f18, and you're changing your shutter speed. And the reason that you do that is just not to... Oh, sorry guys. Not to run into any issues with your depth of field. Obviously, if you start out at like f2.8, let's say, and you go up to f11, that f11 shot's going to have a ton more depth of field than your f2.8 shot, unless it's, if it's infinite. Even if you're focusing out to infinity, you're still going to have some issues. Anyway, so you have the right idea here. You're going up now 30 to 50 to 80. These aren't quite, it's not quite a half stop, because a half stop would be 30 to 45, 30th of a second to 45th of a second. It's not double, it's not a full stop, but it's kind of like a 2/3 of a stop increase, or I should say decrease. So Tammy, the only thing that you kind of missed here was that your highest exposure is actually the correct exposure. And like we saw with the last set of images, what you really want is your correct exposure to be kind of in the middle. So you want to have some exposures above it, and you want to have some exposures below it. But this is actually a really common thing that happens is people shoot it as they meter it, and then they bracket from there rather than starting either 2 stops over or 2 stops under and bracketing. Very common thing that happens. So let's take a look at what this looks like. And I think this looks cool. Definitely you can see pretty clearly here that you are getting an extended dynamic range. Now it's not the full HDR, because you're missing sort of that those exposures above your quote unquote correct exposure. So you're not going to get the full effect or the full look of HDR, but you definitely are getting an expanded dynamic range. You want to call it like an EDR, expanded instead of high. Anyway, so nice, very nice. Ooh, yeah, I'm liking that. I'm liking that a lot. Now, again, as has been previously stated many times, I do have a thing for black and white imagery, but I feel like this is really, I think that black and white is really adding something to it. You're kind of getting like a bit of the contrast bumped up, because like these sort of areas that almost are like a light blue, almost feel like a light blue, and the other one are definitely going a dark gray. Gives a lot more contrast to these white clouds, and then some of these things, like the other image, you can see this is kind of green, and that road is dark gray. It goes like even kind of, like a light gray. So, I think what you're doing here is adding a ton of drama. Oh man, this really makes me think of home. This is like exactly what it looks like where I'm from, the area that I'm from. Uh, so yeah, very nicely done. Split tone, I think, is less effective because you're muddying that super dramatic black and white. But man, that is really an excellent image, Tammy. Very nicely done. Alright, up next, let's look at Montague's work. And, alright, again, this is what you want to see, right? So we assume that his correct image is, or his quote-unquote correct exposure is probably this one. You have -2, or excuse me, not -2, -1 stop, although it's slightly more than -1 stop. Or excuse, slightly less, because 0.6 seconds would be down to 0.3 seconds here, and then 1.5, and it is, again, slightly less here and slightly more there. But I mean, close enough. I'm being super picky. Just ignore them when I say that. So correct, -1, -2, overexposed by 1, overexposed by 2, and then this guy, which is, oh, well, according to this is the same as that, but they don't look the same. Anyway, so let's take a look at what happened there. Okay, not bad. It's tough because this is slightly soft. As of course you can't tell in any of these. But if you look at some of these, they're just like this focus is just barely off, which is tough. Yeah, I think there's definitely some nice I was gonna say exposure things, composition things here. So again, we have the threes. We have sort of a bilateral, pretty much just bilateral symmetry here. If you divide it down the middle, sort of a wine bottle to each side, some blinds to each side, some flowers to each side. You kind of have like this shape reflected down here, and sort of this shape reflected down here, and this shape. So there's some pretty good symmetry. This guy's kind of throwing that off slightly, but not in a way that I think is like necessarily bad at all. Just sort of adding a different element to it. This is very directional from the top lighting. I kind of feel like I want to see this a little bit more like a frontal light coming like from, like 45 degrees here, 45 degrees here. I mean, you can really see you get like a real bright hot spot on these two. I think you could definitely sort of open some of this area up a little more if you had that side lighting. I think between these two, I probably like the HDR more. I'm sorry, the color. Yeah, the one that says HDR on it. Yep, the color version more. Split tone's okay. I don't know if this is necessarily one that a lot is added by going monochromatic. I mean, you do kind of open up some details in here, but no, I like the color better. I think something about like the way that these are like, I mean, like this color is kind of reflecting this color. You see some of this color sort of reflected in here. There's sort of like a nice, it's almost like not necessarily like a radial balance because it's not spreading out, but it's almost like a star shape. Like you kind of have these things, if you can imagine this is like when a person draws a star, up, down, left, right, across. It's kind of got a thing like that going, which I think is actually pretty visually interesting. Anyway, keeps my eye entertained. I do like some, like this. Kind of, there's a lot of reflected stuff there that I'm digging. Alright, thank you, Montague. And last but not least, let's look at Morel's work. And, okay. Oops, I guess I didn't pop it back up here to the top. Okay, so, so we have a picture of a painting here. And I'm seeing your exposure change, but I think you might have gone a little too subtle with it here. If you look at what she's doing, this is another super common thing that happens with HDR. If you look at her f-stops, it's going f8 to f9 to f10 to f11, f12, or f13, f14 is done f12, but that's not a big deal, really. So what I imagine is happening here is we're actually like you're doing like a single click of the thumb wheel each time, which is not giving you your full half stop or whole stop jump in between images. So if you look at this, so a 60th of a second at f20, and then compare it to a 60th of a second at f8. So there's only 16. There's about a stop and a half difference between this and this. And really what you want is 2 stops under to 2 stops over. So technically like 4 stops of difference. And you have, again, F8 to F20. F8 to F16 is a full stop of change. Then F16 to F32 would be another full stop. So you're sitting at like about a stop and a half of exposure difference between there. Which means you wouldn't get the full HDR effect. And if we looked at here, we can kind of see that, yeah, it's not quite that full range. You definitely, again, have an extended range here over what's happening in these individual images, but it's definitely not that full HDR effect. Now, between these 3, I would say I actually kind of like one of these bottom 2, although, let me pop in a little bit here. They're a little bit pixelated. And I'm sure that probably happened when you converted it when you put it into your PDF file. It just maybe got lower somehow. Potentially, maybe, I don't know. I don't really want to speculate on that, but I would say one of these 2. On the one hand, I'm kind of like looking at this because it does have that sort of nostalgia, sepia tone thing happening. But I think I'm probably going to go black and white, simply because you're focusing a little bit more on the composition here, as opposed to the color stuff that's happening. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. I just cannot wake up today. Not wake up. It's been a long day, is what I'm saying. Anyway, all right. Well, thank you, all you guys. I thought that turned out pretty good. So, sorry. Now is the part of the video where you will post a word, and I will give you the word that you post, and you will post it, and that will tell me that you watched the entire video all the way to the end. And this time around, that word is blanket, as in it is very cold and rainy here, and I am going to go now and cuddle up under a blanket to stay warm. So if it is cold and rainy and sleety and snowy where you are right now, I suggest that you do the same. So until next time, keep shooting out there, guys.